On November 20th, 2006, at approximately 3 p.m., two women were walking on a path through the marshy area behind the Golden Key Motel, one of a string of seedy flophouses along Black Horse Pike in the West Atlantic City area of Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey. Looking down at a drainage ditch that ran behind the motel, they saw a woman's body, partially under the water, in the ditch. They called the police. When police arrived at the scene, they found the body the women had seen, but as they searched the area, they also discovered the bodies of 3 other women in the drainage ditch. The bodies were all found along the ditch, spaced out no more than 50 yards apart from one another. None of the bodies had purses, wallets, or identification with them. They were all fully clothed, except they were all missing their socks and shoes. They had all been found with their heads pointing east, towards Atlantic City. Authorities would soon come to believe that all 4 women had been killed by the same perpetrator. The orientation of the bodies and their proximity to the eastbound lane of the Atlantic City Expressway would lead to their unknown killer being frequently referred to as the eastbound strangler, among other monikers. Based on the levels of decomposition present in the 4 bodies, police believed all 4 victims had been killed at different times. The first victim had been killed as early as 6 weeks prior to the discovery of her body. The second victim was killed approximately 2 weeks later. The third died approximately a week after the second victim, and the fourth was killed approximately a week after that, shortly before the bodies were found on November 20th. The body that had brought the police to the scene, and the most recent to have been killed, belonged to 35-year-old Kim Raffo. Kim had grown up in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Canarsie. Both her young parents had struggled with substance abuse, but despite the issues at home, Kim was a loving and happy child who was always smiling. As Kim entered adulthood, she seemed to be on the right path towards a more stable life. She married her husband Hugh in 1989, and the couple moved to Florida to be with Kim's sister and mother, who had divorced Kim's father in 1988. Hugh found a good job working in construction, and the couple purchased a 4-bedroom home in Pembroke Pines. Kim and Hugh welcomed a daughter in 1992 and a son in 1994. In addition to her own children, Kim also helped take care of her sister's 2 children. She was active volunteering with the PTA and Girl Scouts, and her next-door neighbor reported that Kim and her family were ideal neighbors. Kim's idyllic life eventually fell apart. For some reason, something abruptly changed in Kim in 2001, according to her loved ones. I don't know if she just tired of being the one everyone always relied on, her sister Marie said shortly after Kim's death. I don't know if she just got fed up with being supermom or the superwoman of the family. We don't know. I wish I could have had my final words with her. That year, Kim enrolled in a cooking class at the Sheridan Technical Center in Hollywood, Florida. Through the class, she met a habitual drug user named Kenny and began having an affair with him. When Kim's husband Hugh learned of the affair, he attacked Kenny with a baseball bat. Kim refused to end the affair with Kenny or give up the cocaine habit she was beginning to develop under his influence. Hugh therefore took the kids and left. He sold the family home and took the children to Ocean City, New Jersey. Kim moved to Atlantic City to be closer to her children, bringing Kenny with her. After Hugh and Kenny got into another altercation, Kim and Hugh's children were placed in foster care. When they first arrived in Atlantic City, Kim and Kenny both found steady employment at a restaurant inside the Taj Mahal Casino. However, they quickly fell into the drug scene prevalent throughout Atlantic City. Kim's once social drug habit turned into a full-blown addiction to crack cocaine, fueled by her guilt over no longer being with her children. Neither she nor Kenny could hold a job anymore as their drug habit escalated. Kenny began shoplifting, and Kim turned to sex work, selling herself on Pacific Avenue, known locally as the Track, 1 block inland from the boardwalk. On September 9th, 2006, Kim's estranged husband Hugh arrived in Atlantic City. He had been working construction jobs up and down the East Coast. Kenny was in jail at the time on a shoplifting charge. Hugh told his estranged wife he was there to help her if she wanted to get her life back on track. When Hugh left Atlantic City, Kim went with him, and stayed with him for several weeks at a motel in Jericho, New York, on Long Island, while Hugh was working in the area. The couple did not reconcile, but Hugh still viewed his estranged wife as a friend he wanted to help. After 5 weeks in New York, Kim told Hugh that she had unfinished business she needed to handle back in Atlantic City. She made plans to meet back up with Hugh after a week before leaving for New Jersey, but she never returned. This had not been the first time Hugh had tried to help Kim get her life back on track, but it unfortunately would be the last. The last confirmed sightings of Kim alive occurred in the early hours of November 19th, the day before her body was found. She came in to Papa Joe's, a diner on Pacific Avenue, shortly after it opened at 2:30 a.m. According to Joseph Bocino, the owner of the diner who also knew Kim, she ordered her usual breakfast of 2 fried eggs, American cheese and sausage on a Kaiser roll, and a Mountain Dew. After she ate, Kim went outside and got into a black Nissan Maxima. A source who had been a high-ranking member of law enforcement working on the case early on would later tell NJ Advance Media, speaking under the condition of anonymity, that Kim had been with a client in a room at the Taj Mahal Hotel and Casino. She left the room to go buy drugs around 5 a.m., telling her client that she would come back to the room. She never did. He called her several times, but she never answered. The client, a doctor from North Jersey, was identified using Kim's cell phone records. He was cleared by police because surveillance footage supported his account and showed him at the hotel and in the casino. Post-mortem examination would determine that Kim had died as a result of strangulation with some sort of rope or cord. Because of decomposition, authorities were only able to state more broadly that the second-to-last woman killed had died of asphyxiation, with strangulation being a possibility. She was 23-year-old Tracy Ann Roberts from Bear, Delaware. Tracy had been an active and loving child whose favorite thing to do was spend time with her friends. Her life began to go off track when she was 14, and she began experimenting with drugs and alcohol. She dropped out of high school at 16 and found a job as a telemarketer for a mortgage broker. She began dating one of her coworkers and gave birth to their daughter when she was 18. The baby's father was awarded primary custody of her when she was 5 months old. Tracy began taking steps to improve her life, enrolling in a trade school and training to be a medical assistant. She found a job at a doctor's office, and the Delaware Housing Authority helped her purchase a townhome. Tracy's boyfriend brought their daughter to live with her there. According to Tracy's mother, this was the happiest time of Tracy's life. This happy period soon ended, however, when the doctor's office where Tracy worked moved after she had been there for almost a year, leaving her without a job or any way of making her mortgage payments. Her relationship with her daughter's father ended, and her home went into foreclosure. Tracy began using cocaine with increasing frequency. Tracy spent a few years moving between Delaware, Philadelphia, and South Jersey. She returned to Atlantic City for the last time in August of 2006, trying to escape an abusive relationship. She worked for a time as an exotic dancer, until her drug use left her too thin and frail for club owners to want to employ her. She then turned to the streets and to sex work. The once social Tracy became isolated and quiet, according to other sex workers she met during this time. Shortly before her death, Tracy had almost left Atlantic City. On November 8th, a man who had wanted to be her pimp had punched Tracy so forcefully in the neck that she began coughing up blood and had to be taken to a hospital. While she was there, she called her mother, Joyce, to ask her to come pick her up and bring her back to Delaware. Joyce made the 90-minute drive, but found when she reached the hospital that she had arrived 5 minutes too late. Tracy had just checked herself out and left with 2 unidentified men. "We are good people who had a daughter who had a disease," Joyce Roberts said during an interview less than a month later, after Tracy's body was found. She had a drug addiction. It was cocaine. She wasn't just a prostitute in Atlantic City. This was somebody's daughter. The cause of death of the other 2 victims could not be determined because of the advanced level of decay in their bodies by the time they were discovered. 42-year-old Barbara Breidor, believed to be the second woman killed, had grown up in a loving and stable home in the suburbs of Philadelphia and spent summers with her family at the beaches of the Jersey Shore, not far from where her body was ultimately found. She was charming and witty, and considered to be the smartest of her siblings, who encouraged her to go on the game show Jeopardy because she was always able to quickly shout out the right answers when she watched it because she was knowledgeable about such a broad range of topics. Barbara's life changed dramatically when her father died suddenly. His loss tore her family apart and left Barbara in a deep depression. She studied at a community college before transferring to Penn State, but left school after struggling to get through her first year there. She moved to the Jersey Shore for a fresh start and seemed to do well in her new life, holding down a series of steady waitressing jobs. When Barbara's mother opened up the Santa Fe Trading Company, a small chain of stores selling Native American art, jewelry, and clothing, Barbara went to work for her, first working at her shop on the Atlantic City Boardwalk and eventually managing the business. However, when Barbara's mother decided to retire and sold the business, Barbara had to go back to waitressing. In 1997, Barbara achieved her lifelong goal of becoming a mother, giving birth to her daughter, Dominique. However, when Dominique was 4, Barbara sent Dominique to live with her sister Valerie in Florida. Dominique's father had become addicted to painkillers after he was prescribed them after undergoing back surgery many years earlier. Years before Dominique was born, Barbara had taken one of his pills to help with severe menstrual cramps, a small decision which would ultimately have dire and major implications. As the years went on, her own dependency grew, and when the couple was cut off by doctors and could no longer get the prescription medication, they eventually turned to heroin. While it was her escalating drug use that had led to Barbara needing to send her daughter to her sister, her heartbreak at being away from Dominique only encouraged her growing problem. Eventually, Valerie severely limited contact between Dominique and Barbara so as not to upset Dominique, because Barbara would sob uncontrollably at the end of their phone calls and cling to her at the end of their visits. Barbara ultimately agreed to give up custody of her daughter completely because it was what was best for Dominique, and Valerie's adoption of Dominique was finalized within weeks of Barbara's death. Dominique remained in Florida with her aunt, uncle, and 2 cousins. She was put into therapy and became an excellent student with plans to go to college. Barbara's drug use was also a means of self-medicating as she dealt with alleged domestic violence at the hands of Dominique's father. The relationship ended when he was sent to prison on drug possession and burglary charges. Around this time, Barbara started smoking crack and supporting herself through sex work. Barbara was last seen leaving a house she was staying at with a friend in Ventnor, New Jersey, on October 17th. Her 2 sisters tried to file a missing persons report on her, but state police gave them the runaround after they discovered Barbara had a previous arrest for solicitation. "My sister didn't deserve to die the way she died, and then to be thrown like a piece of trash in a muddy ditch. I hope they get the SOB that did this," Barbara's sister Francine said after Barbara's body was found. The 4th body, believed to belong to the first woman killed, was so heavily decomposed that authorities had to rely on releasing descriptions of some of the tattoos still visible on it in order to identify the victim. She may have been killed as early as 6 weeks prior to the discovery of her body. Molly Dilts was just 20 years old at the time of her death. She was from the small mining town of Blacklick, Pennsylvania, where she grew up with not a lot of money, but a lot of love from her family. Molly had been a warm and caring child who struggled as she faced hardships as a young adult. She had trouble coping with the deaths of her mother and her brother when she was a teenager. In response to the losses, she developed a rebellious streak, which led to drinking, drug use, and a few minor run-ins with the law. She was enrolled in the special education program at Blairsville High School, but frequently missed school and dropped out during her junior year. The courts sent her to rehab, but she did not remain sober after leaving. In June of 2005, Molly gave birth to her son Jeremiah. She willingly signed over custody of him to her father. Molly spent the year following Jeremiah's birth, traveling between her hometown in western Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. She first arrived in Atlantic City in the summer of 2006. She came back to visit her family in Pennsylvania at the beginning of October and told them that things were starting to turn around. She still occasionally smoked marijuana, but had stopped using any kind of harder drug. Her family last heard from her on October 7th, when she called collect from a phone booth in Atlantic City. Problems plagued the investigation into the 4 murders from the very beginning. The water in the drainage ditch contaminated the bodies and washed away potential trace evidence. Police believed that the women had been killed elsewhere, and their bodies had just been disposed of in the drainage ditch, leaving them without primary crime scenes to investigate. Furthermore, many of the similarities between the 4 victims had alternative explanations, calling into question their significance. 3 out of the 4 victims had previous arrests for solicitation. Molly Dilts had no such arrests, and her father was not convinced that she had ever turned to sex work, but other women working in the area reported that she had in the weeks before her death. While this may point to the killer being a client who found his victims by picking them up on the streets, the lives of the 4 women overlapped in other ways as well. They were all known to frequent several of the same motels, restaurants, and soup kitchens, providing a wide variety of overlapping locations in their lives, where they also could have crossed paths with the person who killed them. Post-mortem examinations showed that the victims had various kinds of substances in their systems at the times of their deaths. Kim and Tracy had large amounts of cocaine, Molly had a large amount of alcohol, and Barbara had a potentially lethal amount of heroin. Each woman was known to abuse the substance found in her system, so it is unclear if they had acquired the drug on their own, or if the killer had provided it to them in an effort to incapacitate them. Defensive wounds could not be found on any of the women's bodies. This is most significant in the case of Kim Raphael, whose body was found relatively quickly, so the lack of discernible defense wounds could not be attributed to advanced decomposition. The heads of all 4 victims were found pointed in the same direction, east. This led to speculation that the killer was making a statement about Atlantic City, as it was in that direction. Because the woman had been found barefoot and facing the general direction of Mecca, rumors also circulated that a Muslim had been responsible for the murders, as Muslims say their daily prayers, barefoot and facing Mecca. A Muslim man, who was a convicted drug dealer and a friend of Kim Raphael, was brought in by police for questioning, but could never be tied to the murders. In addition, the positions of the heads could also potentially be alternatively explained by the pull of the current in the water in the ditch as it flowed out to the bay, rather than by a deliberate choice made by the killer. The circumstance that appears least likely to have an alternative explanation is the fact that all 4 women were found barefoot, which some investigators believe may indicate that the killer had some sort of foot fetish. Several other sex workers have reported having clients with such an interest around the time of the murders. One of them, a woman named Denise, has come forward reporting a particularly concerning incident. A client of hers had been obsessed with her shoes, to the point where she had given him a pair of them to keep. He was talking about some crazy stuff. He was talking about, really bizarre stuff, like he's killed some people, she later told 48 Hours, who brought in a sketch artist to develop a sketch with Denise's help. The client later sent Denise a Christmas card, in which he referred to himself as the Riverman, feared to be a reference to the Green River Killer, who murdered sex workers in Washington state. The man was eventually identified and found to be a drifter. No direct links between him and the murders has been discovered. The Atlantic City Prosecutor's Office Major Crimes Unit, the Egg Harbor Township Police Department, the Atlantic City Police Department, the FBI, and the New Jersey State Police all worked on the investigation. They conducted interviews and questioned potential suspects, but have never identified a formal suspect in the case. A man who had been staying at the Golden Key Motel was reported to police by his ex-girlfriend after he evicted her from his house following an ongoing domestic dispute, and served time in prison after evidence of an unrelated crime was discovered during a search of his home, but the investigation has never led to any arrests for the murders. A potential major development in the case came 4 years after the 4 bodies were found, in December of 2010. 4 bodies belonging to women who had been involved in sex work were discovered wrapped in burlap along a remote stretch of Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach on Long Island. The similarities between the New York murders and the Atlantic City murders led to speculation that they may have been connected. authorities in Suffolk County, New York, were in contact with the investigators working on the 2006 murders in Atlantic City. Several other bodies of individuals believed to have been killed by the same individual who took the lives of the 4 victims found near Gilgo Beach were found in the following year, but no concrete link to the Atlantic City cases was ever identified. In November 2016, near the 10th anniversary of the discovery of the 4 bodies, acting Atlantic County Prosecutor Diane M. Ruberton declined to say if her office believed the Atlantic City cases were connected to those in Long Island. The week before, however, the Suffolk County Police Department stated that they believed the cases on Long Island and the cases in West Atlantic City were not related. The Golden Key Motel remained a dangerous place, rife with illegal activities in the years after the murders. Along with many of its neighboring flophouses, it was severely damaged during Hurricane Sandy in 2012. Egg Harbor Township purchased several of the damaged motels in November of 2013 and demolished them in 2015 with hopes of redeveloping the area. In a statement released in 2018, Atlantic County Prosecutor Damon G. Tyner refused to describe the still unsolved murders as a cold case because the case is still being actively investigated by multiple agencies. In the same statement, Egg Harbor Township Police Chief Raymond Davis said, "As an original supervisory member of the investigative team assigned to this case, I can confirm that these victims are not forgotten. All member agencies involved in this investigation, local, county, state, and federal, remain diligent in our pursuit of the person or persons responsible. We urge anyone with information to contact law enforcement." 15 years after Kim Raffo, Molly Dilts, Barbara Breidor, and Tracy Roberts were killed, their killer has still not been identified.